Welcome to the Gruber Morning Show, our weekly artificial future podcast, where we talk about all new things related to artificial intelligence. What I have for you today is the image behind me is representative of AI actually enhancing or hacking the brain, as the thumbnail says. Optimizing the brain is another word that we could use. And where I came up with this theme was actually from our first Tesla Roadster customer. Many years ago, 2014, I believe it was, um, we decided to create Gruber Motor Company and needed some customers. So the first manager that we hired, tech manager for Gruber Motor Company, knew someone up in the Bay Area that was having problems with his Tesla Roadster. He had it at a Tesla service center, and typical failures on a Roadster is either the battery or the electronics, in this case, the power electronics module, which is a large three-phase inverter that converts all the DC to three-phase AC for the drivetrain. Well, Tesla's fix at that time for PEMS was complete replacement, regardless of what was wrong with it. Even if it was something minor inside, they did not open up the power electronic module at the service center locations. They simply replaced them. The cost was $10,000. So this customer who knew our tech manager, they began to chat about our capabilities, and we said, well, we've been in the critical power business for 35 years, and we repair inverters all day long, either in our depot or out on site, because we're nationwide. So they agreed that he would send us his Tesa Roadster, and we would dive into this three-phase inverter. We did. We fixed it for $2,700 and completely rebuilt it, and suddenly realized that this was a viable, sustainable business. And since the Tesa Roadster community is fairly small, the word got out quickly that there's an alternative to Tesla repairs, or at least the electronics. So the car went back to the owner, sterling silver, beautiful Roadster, by the way. And Josh, the owner, was very happy with the result and drove it for a number of years. The car ended up coming back about a year or so ago, and this time it was a battery problem. And battery problems are typically the Roadster gets bricked, which means it wasn't charged, and now the battery is suffering, can't charge anymore, until we do what's called a recovery. So we ended up working on the battery, and we got it functioning again, and now it's sitting in EV Preserve, waiting to be sold. In a recent email with Josh, I realized that he's got some links at the bottom of his email, so had some time, clicked on a few of them. Turns out he's active on X and very much into artificial intelligence. He's a philosopher, brilliant man. And I became captivated with some of his X work that he was doing, or the results of the work he's doing posted on X. And today I wanted to spend the first portion of our podcast talking about the kinds of things that he is involved in. His basic premise is, I believe AI can help us make the jump to a new stratum of intelligence without brain implants or any invasive circuitry, through the reorganization and optimization of our current brains. He says, similar to how the power of transformers was unlocked by scaling model size and training data, my thesis is that the power of the human brain could be unlocked by training it against higher quality training data than we have ever had before. In other words, we've only been exposed to, other brilliant humans. Now we've got AI, which is even smarter than the brilliant humans on this planet. And he continues, he says, this time in the form of interactions with high-dimensional information objects, or AI type models. He says, my thesis is such that encounters will cause the brain to respond by increasing human brain model size. synaptic density via synaptogenesis, and minimizing loss, improved weights slash synaptic pathways, thereby increasing human intelligence. So he asked AI to help prototype some high dimensional interactions that might have this effect on the human brain, exchanges and thought exercises that would push the limits of my cognition, yet without venturing into total nonsense. So he says, while meditating on several of these, I did feel my brain stretching, which is a good sign. I just need to make sure that these shifts result in actually increased intelligence instead of just breaking the mind in some useless or debilitating way. So I ended up doing the same type of test. And I was using ChatGPT-4 for this. And what I asked for in the prompt was prototype some high dimensional interactions, including exchanges and thought exercises that will push the limits of my cognition. ChatGPT then thought for 12 seconds. Normally it's much faster than that, a second or two, but this time it paused for 12 seconds, so I knew it was going to come up with something interesting. Its response was, certainly, let's embark on a journey through high-dimensional spaces with thought exercises designed to challenge and expand your cognitive abilities. The first thing was thought exercise number 1, navigating a 4-dimensional maze. The scenario that it painted for me was, imagine a maze that exists in 4 spatial dimensions, excluding time. In 3 dimensions, you can move forward, backward, left, right, up, down. Adding a 4th spatial dimension introduces a new axis of movement. Let's call it anakata, terms coined by mathematician Charles H. Hinton. The challenge now became visualize navigating through this 4D maze. And then it said, here are the questions I want you to ponder. How would walls and passages behave with an extra dimension? What new types of intersections or dead ends might exist? How does your strategy for solving the maze change with the ability to move along the anakata axis? So I had some thought-provoking things to think about here. And it looks like we've got some comments coming in. Niels is joining us. Good evening from Mr. AI Skeptic. Unless it stands for augmented intelligence, which really is all it will be. Niels is fairly unconvinced that AI is going to revolutionize humanity. And you know what, Niels? While we're on that topic, let me read you something that I was going to cover later on after we do some of these thought exercises. And this is from a professor, Noam Chomsky. He's an American professor and public intellectual known for his work in linguistics, political activism, and social criticism. So why is Noam so famous? He created and co-created the universal grammar theory, the generative grammar theory, the Chomsky hierarchy, and the minimalist program. Chomsky also played a pivotal role in the decline of linguistic behaviorism and was particularly critical of the works of B.F. Skinner. I found B.F. Skinner's theories quite enlightening in Psychology 101. It took many years ago. And B.F. Skinner was a prominent psychologist who believed that human behavior could be shaped through a process known as operant conditioning. Experimented on rats and pigeons and provided insights into how behavior can be modified through positive and negative reinforcements. And it was then used widely in business, for example. So here we have a quote now from Noam Chomsky, who didn't like B.F. Skinner and certainly doesn't like AI. And let me tell you what he had to say about AI. The human mind is not like ChatGPT and its ilk, a lumbering statistical engine for pattern matching, gorging on hundreds of terabytes of data, and extrapolating the most likely conversational response or most probable answer to a scientific question. On the contrary, the human mind is a surprisingly efficient and even elegant system that operates with small amounts of information. It seeks not to infer brute correlations among data points, but to create explanations. So, let's stop calling it artificial intelligence and then call it for what it is and makes: plagiarism software. Because it doesn't create anything, but copies existing works of existing artists, modifying them enough to escape copyright laws. And that was from a quote in the New York Times, March 8th, 2023, from Noam Chomsky, who also does not like artificial intelligence. So I thought with Niels' comment, this might be a good time to insert Noam's views on AI. So now getting back to the thought exercises, and for those of you just joining us, what we asked it to do was to create some thought experiments, basically, to expand the human mind. Thought exercise, the next one was the grandfather paradox. Scenario: suppose you travel back in time and prevent your grandfather from meeting your grandmother. Questions to ponder. How can you exist to go back in time if your grandparents never met? What does this paradox imply about the nature of time and causality? And finally, can multiple timelines or universes resolve this paradox? Again, this is AI asking us to stretch our thinking a bit. Now, here's another thought exercise. This is ChatGPT 4 now, talking to me with my request: give me some ideas that will help me expand my cognitive abilities. The scenario is humans perceive only a fraction of the electromagnetic spectrum. Questions to ponder, it says. What aspects of reality might be missing due to our sensory limitations? Well, it's a lot. And let me just give you some thoughts about this. Let's say that you're able to open up your visual spectrum, which is fairly narrow. There are even other life forms on this planet that have a much broader view of that spectrum. Insects, birds, for example, who already see ultraviolet. But what is beyond that? What if we were able to see beyond that? How would our life change? How would our perceptions change? Then there's the audible spectrum. Okay, bats, for example, are able to hear from 700 hertz to 200 kilohertz. A human can hear 30 hertz to maybe 17, 18 kilohertz. When I was younger, one of the experiments we used to do in the radio shop that I worked, I was all of maybe 17 at the time in high school, working with some older guys. Older by then meant late 20s, maybe early 30s. And we had a sweep generator that would create an audio tone based on the frequency that you dial in, and we'd run it through an amplifier, and we would test our hearing. And I was able to hear just over 18,000 hertz. These guys in the shop with me, they topped out at maybe 15, 16 or so. And it was almost to the point where I might be able to hear a dog whistle, which I think is beyond 18, by the way. So how would our life change if we were able to expand our perception, or the electromagnetic spectrum, the visual spectrum, the audible spectrum? It then says, how do technological extensions of our senses alter our understanding of the world? Well, a simple example is you might see flowers differently. If you can see the UV components in flowers, you would realize that they really are different, much prettier than what we're used to. That's just a simple example. The final thing that it asked me to think about was, what does this imply about the nature of objective reality? Fairly limited is what comes to mind here. All right. Continuing now with this, AI is telling me how I can expand my mind. Let me get to another section here. You know what? I think I realized I just ran out of the portions that I documented here. Although there is one other thing that that Josh Witten was working on, which I found fascinating, and that was the mirror test.
Real quick, Pete, before you jump into that, you have a question or a response, I think, up there.
Okay, Niels. Yeah, and one could also mention, that's right, Jan LeCun, who shared the Turing Award with Hinton, who says AI will remain dumber than a cat for a long time because it lacks logic. What do you guys think about that?
That AI will be dumber than a cat?
Yeah. Do you think that AI, that its abilities are capped, that it's limited, that it's finite?
I don't know if I 100% agree with that, but I also don't disagree with that.
All right. That's a very safe statement.
Yeah, I just feel like AI can do so much. It could do what we can do, but in a fraction of a second. But also, there's some things that if we don't tell it to do it, it's not going to do it, or it's not going to feel it. It's not going to, do something. I think AI just isn't there yet. Question is when will we give it the ability to get there?
Or will we give it the ability once it becomes, super intelligent and it actually becomes conscious and continues to evolve itself? The thing I think with AI, our expectation is based on the fact that it has exponentially changed so rapidly that there really is no limit and that it isn't going to slow down. Of course, no one really knows for sure at this point.
The whole point of AI and the use cases of AI going into all the different industries right now is it's being used specifically to overcome limitations. It's not a limiting or limited technology in and of itself. It's going to enable us to go around all of our current limits.
In the field of medicine, solving some of the really tough medical issues. Got another portion later on in this podcast about how AI is being used to find new battery chemistries. It's on everyone's mind. Lithium ion was a major improvement, but according to this article, one of the companies now has 18 new chemistries that they can consider that are actually superior to even lithium ion. So getting back to Josh Witten's work for a moment here, he also works on the AI mirror test. It's a classic test used to gauge whether animals are self-aware. He devised a version of it to test for self-awareness in a multimodal AI. 4 of 5 AIs that he tested passed, exhibiting apparent self-awareness as the tests unfolded. The classic mirror test is, for example, animals are marked and then presented with a mirror. Whether the animal attacks the mirror, ignores the mirror, or uses the mirror to spot the mark on itself is meant to indicate how self-aware the animal is. In his test, he says he holds up a mirror by taking a screenshot of a chat interface. He then uploads it to the chat and then asks the AI to tell me about this image. He then screenshots its response, again uploads it to the chat, and asks it to tell me about this image. The premise is that the less intelligent, less aware the AI, the more it will just keep reiterating the contents of the image repeatedly, while an AI with more capacity for awareness would somehow notice itself in the image. I had a conversation with him yesterday, another cool experiment he did, which we're going to try to replicate. And by the way, he may be a guest in one of our future podcasts. Looking forward to that. He actually had 2 chat bots talking to each other. And it got pretty bizarre until the guardrails came in and shut it down. So that's going to be an interesting experiment for us. All right. We've got another comment here from Gubas from TikTok. He said, I've heard that crows and ravens are colorful in a spectrum that we can't see. That's fascinating. And then Neil says, he says, AI can make overviews, which are hugely useful, but I cannot even add numbers or reason independent but it cannot even add numbers or reason independently. Its training sets will also shrink in the future. Blockers are being put in. Boy, is that more true than ever. We found that the AI versions we were using almost a year ago, very early on, today's versions seem to be less intelligent, especially in the image generation category, or when you ask it to display a slogan on the screen. These days, it leaves out words. It misspells at least 2 or 3 of them. So, yeah, definitely being dumbed down for whatever reason. Niels also says to make unstructured text or images much more accessible, like your manuals, is a perfect use. I agree. Okay. Then, let's see, we're talking about how AI can be used to hack your mind and actually improve it. By the way, if you want to see a picture of Noam Chomsky, here we go. There he is. And he doesn't look very happy when the topic of AI comes up, and that's probably when this picture was taken. Brilliant man, however. All right. So here we go. Microsoft, this is the headline. Microsoft AI discovers 18 new battery materials in 2 weeks. It needed just 80 hours to do something that would normally take humans years. It was able to identify promising new battery materials for the Department of Energy. The challenge was that DC plants or batteries are an essential part of the clean energy future. We need them to power electric vehicles and store energy from solar and wind. Well, currently, lithium-ion batteries are the best option for both of these uses, but they aren't ideal. Lithium is relatively scarce, it's also expensive, and the metal is often unethically mined using child labor and environmentally destructive processes. Picture the brine ponds in Bolivia, where acres and acres of salts are being dried to extract the lithium. And then, of course, you have the other environmental hazards, which is the overland transport to a shipping port, and then the shipping to the countries that are making batteries, and then the overland in those countries once it arrives at the dock. It's not very clean. The most promising aspect, though, is the recycling of lithium-ion batteries, which, according to companies like Redwood Materials, is in the 90% range plus. So it's a high-grade ore, and it is infinitely recyclable. It's like a closed-loop supply chain. Instagram, Terry Burt joined us. He says, we think we control our brain, but it controls us. You know people that fit into that category, guys? How often have we come across a problem and we have woken with the answer? Terry, you nailed it. It's not uncommon for me to cogitate on an engineering problem. And in the morning when I wake up, I suddenly have the answer. It's almost as if my gray matter is working overtime while I'm doing my REM sleep or whatever, and it comes up with an answer. AI scares people. That's true. And that's one of the reasons we do these podcasts, is to demystify and point out that it's happening whether we agree with it, like it. We can fight it all we want, but it's going to happen regardless. We might as well learn to embrace it, utilize it, and adapt. So getting back to this battery process where they used AI. In the past, they said it was always trial and error. Identifying better battery materials is a time-consuming process. Sometimes it comes up in my dreams or in the shower, he says, and I come in and I spend 2 years testing whether it works or not. So he's using the intuitive process, but then it takes a long research time to finally nail something. So what's new? Well, to speed it up, they use the combination of AI models and cloud computing. And this is Microsoft now. The tech giant simulated potential chemical combinations for batteries, starting from a list of 32.6 million materials. Can you imagine a human team trying to manage that kind of a list of materials? Within just 80 hours, it had identified 18 promising candidates for new battery materials. So looking ahead, they say that scientists have already synthesized one of the candidate battery materials for testing, and if it performs well, it could enable production of batteries containing 70% less lithium. All right, Niels says AI also is making it impossible to talk to anyone in government or companies for help and support. That is adding to unproductivity, whereas finding the right people makes things happen faster and better. You'll have to explain how AI, though, could prevent any contact with government or individuals in government or companies. YouTube, Spoonie412, he says, it's not just the brain. Use your heart for guidance. Okay, there you go. So, speaking about application of AI in business, one of our, we have 3 call centers here. These are people that get on the phones and they look for customers that are interested in the services or products that we offer. One of our account managers who has been using AI, and the majority are, by the way, for going over emails and improving them or additional ideas. He decided to try something different. He says, I was testing out ChatGPT's performance today and found that we can use artificial intelligence for prospecting. Prospecting, of course, is finding customers. He says, I only used the standard ChatGPT, and what I found was that when asking the question the right way, ChatGPT came up with a list of companies in Phoenix. He says his prompt was, and let me read that to you, create a contact list of 50 low-voltage installers in Phoenix, Arizona, involving compiling details from various reputable companies specializing in services like security systems, data cabling, audiovisual installations, and more. Below is a curated list of 50 companies along with their contact information. When I first saw this list, I recognized at least half of them because we've been active here in Arizona for 40 years. And most of these are competitors for one of our other divisions, which installs data cabling. So our company, our account managers are using AI in business and finding it to be quite useful. All right. I've got another image I wanted to throw up here for you. And this one, I think, says it all. It requires no explanation. Let's bring up another one. What do you think of this one, guys?
That's pretty brutal. It's true, though.
It is true, yes. That's what makes these so interesting. And then the final one that I wanted to leave you with was, these are 5 powerful facts of life. And the first one is the one that really got me. When the president of Lamborghini, Steve Winkelman, by the way, was asked, why don't you do television commercials? His response was, we don't do commercials because our target audience is not sitting around watching television. We've got a couple more comments, and then we're coming up to our half hour. James C. with YouTube says, finally an AI podcast. Would love to know how I can help contribute to your podcast. Well, James, if you have any suggestions for topics, feel free to email those to ev@gruber.com. And like you're probably finding there's so many changes occurring in the world of artificial intelligence. There is no shortage of material. In fact, we have to be very selective and only select the cream of the crop. YouTube, Niels is back. He says, and he's probably answering the question, why is AI restrictive in terms of being able to contact people in government or business? Because at least here in Denmark, they put up AI bots that listen to one's voice instead of just listing phone numbers. This nonsense layer prevents the right people from getting together. Well, yeah, okay, I can relate to that. These days, voicemail must have elements of AI, and there's nothing more frustrating for me, knowing exactly what I need, exactly who I need to talk to, and what I want, to have to go through layers and layers of answering questions for, hit 1 for Spanish, hit 2 for English, or maybe it's inverted these days, I don't know. But, and then the department questions, and yeah, it goes on and on. Well, looks like we've reached our half-hour mark. I appreciate all of you joining us. We'll be back next week for another edition of the Artificial Future Podcast. I'm Pete Gruber. Thanks for joining us.